Bloodborne has rapidly become one of my favorite video games ever created, having only just played it earlier this year. I've played through the entire story almost twice now, and every now and then I feel like coming back for more. What I realize in my playthroughs is that it isn't just the beautiful, if not at times terrifying, imagery, or the unique and grueling gameplay that kept me coming back. It was also its soundtrack. Bloodborne's fully orchestral OST includes some of the most hauntingly beautiful pieces of music to ever grace video games. But it's the placement of this music that really drives the emotions of the game home. When you start a new playthrough, the first thing you'll notice is that there is no background tune of any sort. It's completely silent. In my opinion, this is one of Bloodborne's strongest abilities. The ability to know exactly when silence can create more of an atmosphere than music can. The silence then only helps to intensify the music when it finally begins. The composers, Ryan Amon, Tsukasa Saito, Yuka Kitamura, Nobuyoshi Suzuki, Chris Velasco, and Michael Wanmacher studied the environment, lore, and imagery of the game in depth to make sure the music perfectly fit into the world of Bloodborne. And it shows. In an interview with PlayStation, Tsukasa Saito says, "We drew on the keywords of mortal struggle and horror, which were determined at the beginning of development, and also build up an image from things like the boss and map designs. In order to express the early modern Victorian setting, we decided to rule out organs, woodwind instruments, and certain brass instruments, such as trumpets, and so on. Rather than something grandiose, we aim for a black and withered atmosphere." The composers wanted the music to emulate the feeling of isolation, which is also felt throughout the game. Bloodborne is often regarded as extremely difficult, and the game itself doesn't lend much of a helping hand either. I'd say the composers help recreate that feeling even when you first load into the application. You're met with the involved company's logos, along with absolute silence. They're not here to help you. When you reach the title screen, the night unfurls begins. You hear a very slow crescendo behind a single female's vocals. The isolation mentioned before. The orchestra rises until it finally overwhelms the vocals, becoming the main component of the mix, possibly symbolizing the world closing in on you, trying to take over, a lot like the game itself. The composers have prepared you for this experience before you even press start. This is Bloodborne. On the other hand, when starting the actual game, you begin in silence, like I said before, creating an uneasy tone. With no real tutorial instructions besides a cryptic message about seeking pale blood, you're forced to explore this mysterious building with no weapons. Moments later, you come across the first enemy, and still, no music kicks in. This is because this isn't an epic battle between two clashing beings. This is a slaughter waiting to happen. You're meant to die, teaching you how cruel and unforgiving this world is. After your first death, you wake up in the hunter's dream. A song of the same title begins to play. This is probably the most serene and calming song in the game. The Hunter's Dream is the hub area where you can level up, buy items, and upgrade your weapons. The score behind this area in the game creates a feeling of safety, without any immediate proof that you're actually safe. Interestingly enough, the first time you hear any music in the city of Yarna, it's a rather unsettling music box coming from one of the houses you can't reach just yet. This song is Lullaby for Murgo. If you've played the game, you probably know that you can obtain that music box and use it against one of the bosses, Father Gascoigne. We'll talk more about him later. Right now, let's discuss one of the first bosses of the game, the Cleric Beast. This boss is not mandatory to progress the game, but it's likely the first that players will encounter. The score named after the boss itself is an outstanding introduction for the beast, and it flawlessly sets the tone. After a while of exploring Yarnum, you'll eventually come across a long bridge infested with a number of other monsters. As you walk towards the gate at the end of the bridge, you begin to hear what sounds like some kind of monster groaning, and suddenly, orchestral instruments begin to swell up. When the Cleric Beast finally reveals itself, it comes out of nowhere, towering over you as a church choir begins to sing, which not only supports the setting of a Gothic Victorian era, but actually connects with the character of the beast itself. The word cleric means a priest or a religious leader, thus making the church choir quite fitting. In fact, the rough English translation for the Latin lyrics in the song are, "This cobweb of sick blood. Our honor is to protect the holy blood. The defenders." It is possible that the Cleric Beast was once a religious leader, maybe even a hunter, whose mission was to cleanse Yarnum of the diseased blood, only to be infected and then become one of the things he despised the most, let alone one of the strongest and most menacing.
Beasts all over the shop. You'll be one of them, sooner or later.
Now back to Father Gascoigne. After the Cleric Beast, this boss is the one you'd have to face next. Like I said before, the Cleric Beast is not mandatory, so players can just skip him and face Gascoigne right away, since they are on opposite sides of the city. Gascoigne is a hunter like yourself, but he has been infected by the disease and is quickly transforming into a beast. The music box I mentioned before is given to you by his daughter, and symbolizes that last bit of humanity remaining inside of him. When you play it during the fight, he becomes distracted and disoriented. It's almost as if he's trying to stop the urge to kill or stop the beast from taking over. Eventually, the disease turns him entirely, and he's transformed into a werewolf-like monster. Even the background music to this boss battle, The Hunter, has two brass instruments that seem to be battling each other in the left and in the right speakers, possibly resembling his inner struggle to fight the disease. The brass instruments crescendo until a choir comes in as one last-ditch effort to bring his humanity back to him. But alas, it fails, and the climax of the song begins. A bass drum now kicking in at every beat once his transformation is complete, signifying that there is no going back. These details can be found throughout the scores of each boss battle in Bloodborne. The choice of Bloodborne's soundtrack in a music analysis video may seem a bit odd and or trivial, but I think most people nowadays have lost a love and respect for games, or even a film's scoring, and because of this a lot of directors and game designers opt out of an original soundtrack. They just purchase the rights to some songs that somewhat go with it and then just send it out. However, there's an art to combining imagery and sound that I'm glad hasn't been lost in recent games like Bloodborne. After all, there's definitely a reason this game has an impressive 92 out of 100 on Metacritic. I often find myself listening to this OST in the background while I'm doing things, or just because I really want to, and having flashbacks of each battle I experienced, being shifted back to the world of Bloodborne, and discovering the beauty in its horror, the beauty in its darkness, the beauty in its isolation.